Gary DePaul with Unlabeled Leadership. Welcome to episode 83, Talent Review and Succession Planning. Here's a shout out to listeners in Olympia, Washington, and in Texas, Dallas, El Paso, Magnolia, McAllen, and Missouri City. This episode is an experiment. What I'm doing is I'm trying out a shorter version with a concept that most people are familiar with, or many people are familiar with, but adding a twist to it. I may have a longer episode with a guest later on the same topic. Part 1, Succession Planning. What do you do when a senior executive leaves your organization? This is a question that is asked by people in HR and by the executive boards of many organizations, and their answer is succession planning. Succession planning is a process for identifying prospective employees that can replace existing senior executives and also replace people in critical roles. The concept is pretty simple. You identify prospective employees, and then you ask how long would it take for this person to be prepared to take over a role if an existing executive decides to retire or leave. Then you would ask, what can we do to prepare this employee to take over the role sooner if needed? From that, you create a development plan to help the employee and ultimately prepare that person for that position. Part 2, Talent Review. Talent review is a little bit different. With talent review, you're looking at a wide range of employees from all levels of the organization, and your intent is to determine their potential within the company and how they may be able to fulfill certain roles or future roles that are needed to address anticipated needs in the organization. Talent reviews is different from performance management. Performance management traditionally, and it's not always true now, traditionally is an annual process. In a talent review, you're looking over a longer period of time for a particular employee and trying to determine their potential. Like a succession planning process, there's usually a development phase in which you're trying to figure out how to prepare certain individuals for specific positions or future roles that are needed in the company. If people tell you they have a succession planning process and then they describe it, oftentimes they end up describing talent review rather than succession planning. They're very similar, but one is addressed for replacing specific roles, critical roles in the organization. The other is more of a broader scope of trying to identify the potential of future executives, managers, and people that could also end up in key positions. While talent review ain't succession planning, it doesn't really matter what you call it, just as long as you have processes in place that effectively prepare your organization and your workforce for future needs. Part 3, what can get you in trouble? Predicting potential is a lot harder than it sounds, and it's definitely more complicated. The Corporate Executive Board reviewed some findings, and they found that at least 1 in 7 people are wrongly placed in a succession planning process. 40% of what they call leaders fail to meet the business objectives in their new role. 55% of high potentials end up dropping out within 5 years. If you read the literature on this subject, you'll find that there's very little in place, if any, about what it takes to successfully predict someone's potential. A specific mistake that many managers make when they're going through this process trying to identify potentials is they assess technical skills for management positions. The problem with this is that the role of the manager is to accomplish work through other people, not do the work yourself. If you're looking for people that are too technical, you run the risk of having employees, new managers, who end up doing the role itself rather than delegating, coaching, and helping other people with the role. Having technical expertise is helpful for coaching, but it's not necessary for the particular role. This is why a lot of organizations have what are called calibration sessions, where management looks at a pool of candidates or employees and they calibrate how they assess the employees so that it's as even as possible. Unfortunately, succession planning and talent review are complex. The models that are out there don't necessarily work very well, especially something called the 9 boxes, which is popular in succession planning. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you go to the show notes, there's several links to articles that you can view about succession planning and talent review. And some of the articles say succession planning, but they really are talking about the broader talent review rather than succession planning. If you like this particular episode or like the format, have a comment or question, just go to unlabelleadership.com, click the message icon, and you can leave a 1-minute voicemail message. Also, I'd like to thank those who contribute to the show. Your contributions help with the production costs, which is extremely important because this is a volunteer service. Lastly, I'd like to thank you for listening. Until next time, lead on.